We do health. SMS MedShield to 33023 or talk to your broker to get your kind of care.
Imagine while cooking and you accidentally cut your finger with a knife and the bleeding doesn't stop. Imagine after being circumcised, your child's wound bleeds without stopping. Imagine after surgery, you bleed continuously. Imagine if your child comes back with bruises and swollen joints daily after playing. Imagine painful swollen joints that are filled with blood after participating in your favorite sport. Imagine being told that to avoid all of these, you have to inject yourself with expensive medicines for the rest of your life. What could this be? Is it life-threatening? Could it be that you are hemophiliac?
Yes, that condition is hemophilia. World Hemophilia Day was celebrated on the 17th of April. Now, on this day, the focus was on recognizing the women or girls living with a bleeding disorder and the mothers, sisters, and partners who play a vital role in supporting their loved ones with hemophilia. So today we'll learn more about hemophilia. And assisting me is a guest panel comprised of a hematologist, a genetic counselor who's also representative of the South Africa Hemophilia Foundation, and she's also a parent of a child with hemophilia. And we'll also be joined by a person with hemophilia, also from the South African Hemophilia Foundation. Now, we invite you to be part of this show by asking the panel some questions or simply just sharing your views with us. In that case, the number to call is 011 714 6918 or 6919. You can also tweet us at SABC Health Talk or simply just interact with us on our Facebook page, SABC Health Talk. So sit back, relax, and learn from this exciting show coming to you just after a short break. I'm Dr. Sello Mataung, and this is Health Talk.
MedShield, embracing our members in good health since 1968.
We do not just speak. We let every voice in our nation find full expression in language and in culture. We do not just teach. We empower all people with education. We do not just bring you the news. We place you where the news is happening. We do not just entertain. We take you on journeys. We do not just broadcast sport. We create an arena for sporting heroes to inspire you. Ours is not just a job, it's a calling to ensure that everyone in our nation is informed, educated, and entertained. We're able to do this because you do your part. SABC TV licenses. It's all made possible by you.
If we're talking health, then let's talk seriously.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
Well, a very good morning and welcome to AM News live at 10:00 hours across all Central Africa regions.
A fitting send-off for a revolutionary giant. A life dedicated in service of the people.
The result means that the Swallows are out of the ABC Multiple League and drop to the amateur fourth tier of South African football, the SAB League.
Tune in on AM News every Saturday and Sunday from 10 hours.
Welcome back. So today we're going to learn more about hemophilia, and we have a special panel of guests. First up on my extreme left is Dr. Zipho Zonke Mafika, who's a hematologist, and he's based at the hematology department at the Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital. Welcome to Health Talk, Dr. Mafika.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and next to him is Julie Malan. Julie is a genetic counselor and also administrator for the South African Hematology Foundation, the central region thereof. Welcome to Health Talk.
Thank you so much.
And by the way, I might as well add that she also is a parent of a child with hemophilia. All right. Perhaps let's start with you, Dr. Mafika. What are we talking about here? What is hemophilia?
Hemophilia is a bleeding disorder in a broad sense, particularly an inherited bleeding disorder in the majority of the patients that live with the disease.
Right.
It predisposes one to bleeding, and with a very strong family history.
Okay.
And about 60% of the patients have got a strong family history of hemophilia.
We're going to come back to the family history and the risk factors and so on.
Yeah.
But we're told that there's different types of hemophilia. Just take us through that.
Absolutely. So there are different types of hemophilia. I mean, if I may look at it under a single umbrella, we've got two hemophilias, one that is inherited and one that is acquired. The inherited one particularly has got three types of hemophilia. The first one is hemophilia A, which is basically caused by a deficiency of a coagulation factor 8. And this coagulation factor 8 is one of the ingredients that is required by the body to stop bleeding or avert a bleed in a case where there already is a bleed. Then there is hemophilia B, which is caused by a deficiency of coagulation factor 9, which affects 1 to 30,000 boys that are born annually. And then there is another rare form of hemophilia, which is hemophilia C, which affects 1 to about 100,000 people annually, which particularly affects people of the Ashkenazi Jewish descent.
All right. But Julie, we've heard of the different types, hemophilia A. I'll ask him now about the so-called von Willebrand's.
Absolutely.
But how common is this problem, particularly in South Africa?
Well, we know that the incidence of hemophilia A is about 1 in 5,000 boys that's born yearly, and then also hemophilia about 1 in 20 to 1 in 30,000 people. So with our population of 50 million plus people, we'd expect to have just over 5,000 patients who has hemophilia. Currently on our register, however, we have just over 2,000 patients with hemophilia and other bleeding disorders.
All right. You are from the South Africa Hemophilia Foundation. Just tell us a little bit about the foundation. What exactly do you do as a foundation? Do you only support those that have hemophilia? What do you do?
Okay, the foundation started in 1970 in the Eastern Cape. And from there it has grown. We are part of the World Hemophilia Federation as well. And we are basically a patient support group. So we are there not just for the patients, but for the families of people with hemophilia. So our aim is to, first of all, we try to make sure that our patients get the best care possible. So we try to improve treatment. We like to educate the public. We like to help with education of the medical personnel. So it's really a support group where patients support each other and families support each other as well.
I see. And back to you, Dr. Mafika. We'll explain now the concept of why only boys suffer from this, and why don't we see girls?
Absolutely.
But just let's go through typical signs and symptoms. What do people with the hemophilia, experience?
Absolutely. Okay, so the presentation clinically is related to the severity of the disease. By that I mean the more severe the clinical phenotype of the disease, the earlier the possibility that the patient will present with the clinical symptoms. If I may take it from the time that they are born, some of them will present with what we call cephal hematomas during the...
so that would be now bleeding into this... Into the head.
Outside of the cranium.
Okay, right.
As a result of the pressure which is caused through the birth canal.
Right.
And then at a later stage, some of them, for an example, in the Jewish community, whereby boys are being, on the 7th day, they are being circumcised, then the circumcision site or the wound itself will bleed. There will be a prolonged bleeding from that area.
So essentially you're saying that's how it's actually seen or diagnosed?
That's how early it can be picked up clinically. In other words, that's when we start having a high index of suspicion that this patient may have a bleeding diathesis. And at that time, I mean, it could very well be, not be hemophilia, it could be any of the other bleeding diatheses.
Right.
And then at a later stage, when they start crawling and start experiencing new environments whereby they touching and they bumping around tables and so on, then they start bruising from those areas. And I think I may just warn people, sometimes, you know, as healthcare clinicians, we may be worried that, you know, the poor baby or the poor kid is being abused, only to find out that actually the bruising that we are seeing from this young person that is obviously unable to talk for themselves is a bleeding diathesis.
It must be difficult though. I mean, kids run around, kids bump into things, and it's not uncommon to see a child with a bruise or two. Now, how are you going to differentiate between what's a normal bruise from a simple bump and what is hemophilia?
Absolutely. So the phenotype clinically of hemophilia is that they tend to bleed specifically into your big joints as well as into your big muscle compartments. And a child specifically may be complaining of pain in that area, pain that does not subside, and that they're not moving that limb as, I mean, they would move it normally. In comparison, for an example, to a baby that just bumps themselves and then 2-3 hours down the line they're able to pick up and be active again. And that's when we start getting worried, because now once they start bleeding into that joint, then they start losing a lot of blood into that joint, and then they become a little bit pale because they're losing blood, and then the behavior also changes. And typically the parents are the ones that would say that, you know, my child is a child that is very active, and then all of a sudden, I mean, he's got a bit of swelling in the right knee, and they're not as active as they used to be. And I'm concerned that maybe they may have broken a limb, and only to find out that in fact it is a bleeding diathesis, in this case most likely hemophilia.
Okay. So Julie, obviously, I mean, you tend to see it more in children because that's where it's diagnosed.
Absolutely.
And you then would have the anxious parents.
Yes.
What does the foundation do for the parents? And before you answer the question, let's take Martha from Widmeg. Martha, welcome to Health Talk.
Good morning.
Morning, Martha.
Yes, good morning, sir. My name is Martha. I've got a disease called antithrombin 3 deficiency.
Yes.
Which is, you know, I am a bleeder.
Right.
So I've been on warfarin, and they've now taken me off warfarin, and I'm on ecotrim.
Yes.
Is there something else that can be done for me, or?
All right. We'll get the doctor to respond to your question quickly, Dr. Mafika.
Okay. Hi, Martha. So the antithrombin in itself is a natural anticoagulant. So in other words, it's one of the body's mechanisms of trying to avert a clot from proceeding. Because remember, we always want a balance between a bleed and the formation of a clot. Now, I just want to ask one question first before I go ahead.
I think she's gone, but it's fine.
Because particularly, I want to find out why was she on warfarin?
Yeah.
Because people who are on warfarin are people who actually have a thrombosis problem, meaning a clotting problem.
That's not quite related to hemophilia. Absolutely. Because it may be a slightly different problem.
Different
problem.
All right.
Unfortunately, we have to go for a quick break, but I haven't forgotten my question to you, but we'll take that after the break. Okay, time for a quick commercial break. After the break, we'll learn more about what actually causes hemophilia and how does it come about. Please stay with us.
MedShield Medical Scheme doesn't just cover you when you're ill, we'll help you stay well. At MedShield Medical Scheme, we don't just talk health, we do health.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Media Monitor. I'm your host, Alicia Jali. What has been happening on the digital front?
To win the CAF Championship was a huge thing, and perhaps we ought to have celebrated him even more.
Absolutely.
73% of our schools, regardless whether they're in the township or they're in urban areas, if you go to those schools, you are guaranteed a matric pass.
It is the one thing that we haven't done well as a country. We have thrown money at it. I mean, if you ask for figures, you'll be told we're spending well in education.
90 billion.
But the performance of the system has not been good enough.
All right, we talk about a healthy lifestyle, but what is this healthy lifestyle?
What we're talking about really is you are healthy in those three areas of life: body, mind, and soul.
Before you embark on a weight loss journey, rather first speak to your person who has your complete clinical picture.
Ideally, your plate should look like this. Half of your plate should be fruit and vegetables. A quarter of your plate, starch. Quarter, protein.
Show you some of the things that I really enjoy doing for that bottom pouch as well as for cardio. So you do your kicks, you kick back.
Join Health Talk every Saturday for all your health news.
Welcome back. We're talking hemophilia, and we're now going to be talking about the causes and risk factors for hemophilia. And with me in the studio are two special guests, Dr. Zipho Zonke Mafika, who's a hematologist at the hematology department at Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital. With him is Julie Malan, a genetic counselor, administrator for the South African Hematology Foundation, the Central Region. All right. Any of you perhaps can start with this. Now, we need to understand the genetics. Dr. Mafika, you mentioned that people are born with this condition. All right, we're not talking acquired, but let's start with
talking inherited.
The inherited. How does it happen? You're a genetic counselor. This is probably something that you do on a daily basis. We'll try and put it up on the screen now. Just explain to us what actually happens.
Okay. So hemophilia is what we call an X-linked recessive inherited disease.
Right.
And what it means is our genes, as you all know, we've got genes in every single cell in our body. And us humans have got 20 to 30,000 genes.
Right.
And they're spread over out to 46 chromosomes.
Yeah.
And we've got, males have got an X and a Y as our sex chromosomes.
As we have on the screen now, yeah.
Yes, and females have got 2 X chromosomes.
Right.
That's basically what differentiates us between male and female.
Right.
Now the gene for hemophilia is carried on the X chromosome.
Mm-hmm.
So as you can see on the screen, a female has got 2 X chromosomes. And that's why we say, and we mentioned it earlier, it's mostly boys that we see that have hemophilia. Mm-hmm. The reason being, boys only have, or males only have 1 X chromosome. Mm-hmm. So if you inherit a chromosome or the gene that has got a mutation on it, you have only got that mutated copy that cannot do its function, and therefore you will have hemophilia. Whereas the woman carries 2 copies of the gene because they've got 2 X chromosomes. So if a mother is a carrier of the hemophilia gene, then she's got 1 copy of the gene that's affected and 1 normal copy.
Okay.
And usually the normal copy compensates for the one that's not working.
Okay. So as we have it in this picture now, the picture on the left, where the one scenario is where the father carries the hemophilia gene, and there's a 25% or is it 50% chance that there'll be two girls with hemophilia or carriers.
Yes, if the father is affected with hemophilia,
right,
all his daughters will be obligate carriers of the hemophilia gene,
right,
because he's only got that copy of the X chromosome that has got the mutated gene on it. His sons will not be affected and obviously not carriers.
I see.
So a father can't pass it on to his son, but his daughters will all be carriers.
All right, and let's flip it around. The mother this time is a carrier and the father is okay.
Then what we've got the scenario where in every scenario where it is a boy, there's a 50% chance of the boy being affected with hemophilia, and the daughters has got a 50% chance of being a carrier. So if we break it up 1 in 4, we say there's a 25% chance with every pregnancy that a son with hemophilia can be born.
And that one event, or the last scenario that we don't have it here, where both the father and the mother have the gene.
Yes, those are the rare cases where we can get females with hemophilia.
Right.
Because they can then get an X copy from mom with the mutated gene, and then father being a person with hemophilia will pass on the same one.
Okay. How common is that, or how rare is it?
It's very, very rare, and we refer to it as homozygosity. In other words, like Julie has mentioned, is that you're getting one copy that is mutated from the dad, and as well as unfortunately from the mother as well, and then those two together result in a compound homozygous state, which then obviously they also will present with the disease as hemophilia. Not very common, but it's something we need.
I want to ask you about what do you do in terms of genetic counseling just now, but let's take Anonymous on the line. Anonymous, welcome to Health Talk. Anonymous, are you there?
Yes, I'm there.
Okay. Your question or comment, please?
Yeah, I'm a man with 31 years old. So in 2015, I started to see my blood at the back when I go to toilet, understand? So I don't know how does it come from.
You started seeing blood where?
At my back when I finished to make the job for toilet.
Oh, I see. All right. This is probably, okay, let me give it to you. It's probably not related to hemophilia, but I mean, he says that he sees blood in his stools. Yeah.
No, certainly. I mean, it may not be related specifically because he's quite an elderly gentleman of 31 years. If it is indeed hemophilia, it most likely would be the mild forms of hemophilia, which don't present at an early stage. What normally happens is that our patients sometimes, because they are older, they take some tablets and herbs and so on that may interfere with their coagulation cascade and so on, and they may have in the upper GIT bleed or in the gastrointestinal tract, they may have bleeds which then come down on the number 2 on the stool as a bleed. Or he may have something that's localized in that area, such as your hemorrhoids, for example, that bleed, which may not really be.
Or in the worst case scenario, even cancer.
Even malignancy.
Okay. So in this case, Anonymous, I hope you're still watching. Please, it's not normal to have bleeding down there at your backside. So please just make sure that you consult a healthcare professional as soon as possible. All right, let's get back to genetic counseling. So what do you then do as a genetic counselor?
So basically, as a genetic counselor, our job is to give a patient the information that they need with regards to their family history. So as genetic counselors, we usually start our session and draw a family pedigree to see whether we can see if there is hemophilia in the family. And then we can go and determine who is at risk of being carriers, and we can offer them genetic testing. So as genetic counselors, we also then support the family to go through all the testing. We give the results back, discuss with them, and then refer them to the proper places for treatment or management of the condition.
Okay. I don't want to discuss this here, but I will ask you that question. I still have it at the back of my mind as to what support you give to the parents, but perhaps later on when we come to talk about treatment of children and so on. But let's get back to you, Dr. Mafika. Now, we've spent quite a bit of time on the inherited form of hemophilia. Let's talk about the acquired form. How common is it, and what causes that?
Okay. So the other branch up part of that umbrella I was talking about is acquired hemophilia. It's not as common as the inherited version of hemophilia. However, we are seeing a few patients now with acquired hemophilia, particularly in the setting of existing malignancies, people who have problems with their immune system, some of which may be related to the underlying malignancies itself, or in terms of connective tissue problems like your autoimmune disease, whereby the own body, the own body's immune system recognizes some of its antigens or some of its cells as foreign, and therefore makes antibodies against specific coagulation proteins, specifically your factor 8 or your factor 9, which we also see in your inherited forms. So the risk factors for that also includes people who are going, for an example, surgery. We also see it also when people have gone for immunization, specifically in your young population of patients. Because remember, even with vaccinations, what normally happens is that your body starts making antibodies against that vaccine in order to be immune against that vaccine. But sometimes there can be a cross reaction between antibodies that are being made by the body against the coagulation factors.
It's quite a complicated story here.
Absolutely.
But fortunately, that's not that common. The common ones are the inherited ones. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, perhaps it's a good time to break at this time and go for a quick commercial break. After the break, we'll now look at how it is to raise a child with hemophilia and talk about, the problems around treatment of hemophilic children or children with hemophilia. Please stay with us.
MedShield, embracing our members in good health since 1968.
It's so good, nothing else can replace just your slightest embrace. And if you only would be my own for the rest of my days, I will whisper this phrase, my darling, c'est bon.
If we're talking health, then let's talk seriously.
So from Port Elizabeth, I eventually left there, joined the circus, as you know, and travelled. I was a singer, I was a race car driver, and I wanted to see what my chances were in America. So I started off with MTV and I started producing music because I was in the music business, So I started producing musical acts with Black Sabbath, Guns N' Roses, Motorhead, and I became Wine, Women and Song. That was my life in Hollywood.
A pioneer, a Crystal Award recipient, Basil Gold is a force to be reckoned with. For more inspiring stories, stay tuned to Bupilong every Friday.
Hemophilia is a rare inherited disorder that leads to abnormal bleeding and specifically the inability to stop bleeding. This condition affects at least 1 in 10,000 newborn, predominantly male children. Not many are aware of the disease as well as how to treat it. Gauteng Mam Nerissa Roberts' son Ezra is one of many children living with hemophilia.
Zama, Ezra was diagnosed just a few days after he was born. When he was circumcised in hospital and the wound just wouldn't stop bleeding.
For Roberts, the diagnosis came as a huge shock.
It was a huge shock. It was very stressful. I had to become an expert on hemophilia overnight. I had no idea how I was going to deal with this. I'd never heard of it. I wasn't sure if I would be able to raise him as a healthy, normal little boy. It was a world of confusion. Those first few months was a haze of tears.
Ezra's family had to make a lot of changes because of his condition.
In the beginning, it was very drastic. We had to go to the Charlotte Hemophilia clinic once a week. Had to take time off work to go and have tests done and see the doctors. The beginning was hard when babies start to crawl and they get more active. It's a lot of bruises, a lot of falls, a lot of worries. Sit nicely. But now he's almost 6 now. We inject him 3 times a week. So it's part of our routine. It's part of our lives. If we go somewhere where we know there'd be jumping castles or a lot of activity, then we prepare for it. And yeah, it's become part of our lives. It's a lifestyle for us now.
According to Roberts, with increased awareness and education about hemophilia, life is getting much easier as Ezra grows.
He's great. I mean, he understands everything that's happening. He'll tell you what he knows about hemophilia. He's very clued up.
It means I can bleed easily and I can bleed in my body. And without you see I bleed in my body, it just comes a bruise.
He knows if he falls, he must tell a teacher or tell an adult, and he must make sure that I always know that I can treat him with the factor 8 that we inject him with 3 times a week. 3 times a week he comes, I say it's time to inject. It's part of his life.
But Robert says hemophilia treatment comes at a huge cost.
Thank goodness for medical aid. Our medical aid covers most of his treatment. A lot of it we do have to substitute. So we inject him with factor 8. It's hemosolvate factor 8. It's the factor that his body doesn't produce. That is very, very costly. Medical aid pays at 100%, which is a real godsend. We do have to pay for some of the disposables like gloves and needles, the things we use to inject him with. So yeah, it's very costly. If it wasn't for medical aid, I don't know what we would do.
There is no cure yet for hemophilia, but with proper treatment and self-care, most people with hemophilia can maintain, be active and live a productive lifestyle.
What a sweet little boy. Welcome back. Now we're going to learn more about hemophilia in children, and with us in the studio is, in the middle, Dr. Zipazonke Mafika, who's a hematologist based at the Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital in the hematology department. And close to me is Julie Malan, who's the administrator, Central Region of the South African Hemophilia Foundation. And now we're joined by another special guest, also from the Hemophilia Foundation. Tebogo Mphahlele is a person living with hemophilia, but his position at the South African Hemophilia Foundation is that he's the Vice President of the Central Region. Welcome to Health Talk, Tebogo.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Perhaps before I start with you, I see that, I couldn't help but notice, you guys are wearing red. The 2 gentlemen have red bow ties and the lady has a red tie. Yes, I'm wearing a red shirt, but not quite a tie. Tell us about this red thing. What is this? What does this signify? Perhaps let's start with you, Tebogo. What does this red thing signify?
In order to raise awareness this year, we opted for a red tie challenge.
Right.
Where we have as many people wearing red tie so that they could ask questions and say why we're wearing red tie. So we would explain about hemophilia, that we're creating awareness around hemophilia.
Right.
And we take selfies and collage them together and have one huge photo of people wearing red ties with more information on hemophilia as well.
All right. I'm going to ask about your personal story with hemophilia just now. But before that, let's take Anonymous again on the line. Anonymous, welcome.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello.
Yeah. Your question or comment, we can hear you clearly.
Okay. Yeah, my question is that I'm just asking about the hemophilia patients, because they are now struggling to get circumcised because they are saying that there is a shortage of factor 8.
They're struggling to circumcise a child because they say there's a shortage of factor 8.
Yes, and there is a lot of children that are still waiting to get circumcised. So the problem is that hospital says that there is a shortage, a lot of shortage of factor A. So there's nothing that the government can help our children to overcome that. Yes.
Okay, perhaps Dr. Mafika would like to ask one or two questions. Yes.
Where is the child being seen? Where are they from?
Which hospital are we talking about, Anonymous?
It's the vehicle. They're saying that there is a shortage all over.
All right.
But my child is in
Okay. All right. Perhaps we'll try and address that when we talk treatment as well. But perhaps you want to comment, Dr. Mafika?
Yeah. So, I mean, Steve Biko is one of the academic centers.
Yeah.
It's a tertiary institution, and you know, if there is a shortage of coagulation factor, it's really just an administration issue that could be sorted out, because we do have patients, in fact, who go for surgeries beyond just circumcision, or you know, under factor cover, and they don't bleed because
so
they're covered. I think she just needs to go back to the hospital and find out really what the issues are. I don't know if you've got anything to add, or Julie.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I've went through major surgery through factor.
Yeah. Okay. Tell us about your story. When were you diagnosed with hemophilia?
I was diagnosed at 10.
Right.
But my parents don't know how I reached 10. And when I was diagnosed, even the doctors didn't understand how I could have lived so long without having factor, because I'm one of those rare, less than 1% deficiency. So my factor 8 levels are like almost non-existent. So they are the concern.
So you probably have recollection of what you suffered from as a little boy at the time. Just share some of those stories.
Suffered from everything.
Yeah.
But the biggest one is primary school was a nightmare.
Primary school, yeah?
Primary school was a nightmare because you would attend 2 days in a week, and the other, 3 weeks, you'd be at home waiting to heal so that you can go back to school. Every boy plays hard. That is like a basic boy. They play hard. We run around, we climb trees, we fight, we do all sort of stuff. But with me, with every playing episode, came a bleed.
Must be hard.
It must be. Then again, you got targeted joints where you just bleed spontaneously. And there's that, plus the actual bleeds that you get from playing around. And I had a targeted knee, which meant that I would walk 2 minutes, and the next 2 minutes I can't walk. I would be sitting in class, came fine to school, then the next thing I can't take myself home because I got a spontaneous bleed into my knee. It makes you look odd. You suffer in isolation because it was the time of corporal punishment, and not many children will be associated with you because you can't play. Again, if they get into trouble, they're gonna be punished, and you won't because you have a condition.
It must be hard. Perhaps let's come back to you. I can only imagine being a parent and having a child going through all of this. It must be hard. It gets back to that original question I asked you. What kind of support do you give to the parents? And perhaps from your experience, you can tell us about your own experience too. You have a little child with hemophilia.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, let me start with my child, and then I'll get back to how I got help and where we got to where we are now. My son was diagnosed at the age of 5 days after birth. He developed an intracranial bleed. He was hospitalized, and at that time we didn't know that we had a family history of hemophilia in the family. And then we got the diagnosis. He was hospitalized, he was put on a ventilator in the pediatric ICU, and the nurse, initially they didn't know what was going on. And the nurse who looked after him that day came out after her shift that evening, and we were sitting in front of the ICU. And she walked down the passage, and she turned around and she shouted across the passage to me, "Oh, by the way, we now know what caused the bleed. He's got hemophilia." And that was our first idea or reality regarding hemophilia. So he was hospitalized for 10 days with a massive intracranial bleed from which he recovered. We immediately were referred to the Hemophilia Treatment Center at Steve Biko. So after he was released from hospital in about 20 days, we went and visited the hematologist there, and there we started getting our information with regards to hemophilia. There we also met other parents at the clinics who had children with hemophilia and who were a bit older. And from their experiences, we started to learn. And it was so nice just to have other people you could contact when you're really feeling down, because as a mom, you worry. When they start walking, when they start crawling, they start falling over, those bumps and bruises. And as a mother, you feel like a failure every time your child gets a bleed.
Let's just perhaps, okay.
Yeah,
Sorry for interrupting, but let's just take Eleanor on the line from Cape Town. Eleanor, welcome to Health Talk.
Hi.
Your quick question or comment, please?
Okay, this is just a question. I'm watching your program now.
Yeah.
I've been diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma, but I attend the hematology clinic at Grooteskier.
Yeah.
Is there a relation to these two sicknesses?
Excellent question. Thank you for your question. Dr. Mafika, quickly.
No, there is no really a direct relation between a non-Hodgkin lymphoma or a Hodgkin lymphoma to hemophilia. The one that I can really think of is that if one has got a lymphoproliferative disease or some kind of malignancy that involves the lymphoid system, they are at risk of getting an acquired form of hemophilia.
Yeah.
So
but she would know. I mean, the doctors
obviously, if she has, bleeding symptoms and so on, then perhaps they should look into it.
Okay. We're not going to have time to talk about the principles of treatment in children, but I'd like you to keep that in mind because we will come back to that in the next segment. But let's get back to you. You're talking about, as a mother, and you're still going to get back to what you do.
Yes.
For other mothers,
so what we have in the foundation, we've got what we call the Parents Empowering Parents program, where we get a couple of mothers and fathers together, and we sit, and we've got 2 or 3 days where we sit with them and we talk about, starting off about hemophilia, what it is, what the treatment is, and then going on to things such as discipline, how do you raise a child with hemophilia, and we share our stories, which is very important. So in that way, we get to learn each other, we get to know each other, and we are there to support each other. So that's a really good support group that we have within the Hemophilia Foundation. So whenever we have a get-together, then moms just coming together and realizing we're going through the same things. We all start out with our little moms. There's a term for us, we call helicopter moms, because we hover above our children trying to prevent every fall and every bruise, which we can't do, until we finally get to the realization they're okay. And remember that they're first boys, and then they've got hemophilia. They need to be boys and play like boys.
Very, very nice. Okay, anyway, we're going to talk about treatment just now, but time for a quick commercial break. Let's go for a break, folks. When we come back, we'll talk about treatment of hemophilia for both children and adults. Please stay with us.
MedShield Medical Scheme doesn't just cover you when you're ill, we'll help you stay well. At MedShield Medical Scheme, we don't just talk health, we do health.
Well, a very good morning and welcome to AM News Live at 10:00 hours across all Central Africa regions.
A fitting send-off for a revolutionary giant. A life dedicated in service of the people.
The result means that the Swallows are out of the ABC Multiple League and drop to the amateur fourth tier of South African football, the SAB League.
Tune in on AM News every Saturday and Sunday from 10 hours.
Water-wise, water is an essential need. The scarcity of it could lead to loss of many lives, including livestock, plants, and much more. It requires us to use it sparingly and responsibly in times of need, failing which our taps and sanitation will not function. For more on water and weather issues, stay tuned to News Today, every Friday at 4:45 Central African Time. SABC News, making you water-wise.
It is 6 p.m. Central African Time, broadcasting live from Johannesburg. This is Primetime News.
South Africa said farewell to one of the Rivonia trialists, Uncle Cappy, a fearless stalwart.
With this man who was so engaged, so busy, so witty, so funny, so wise, and so incredibly principled.
Joseph Shabalala has been honored for his contribution to the South African music industry. A statue in his honor was unveiled during an annual gala dinner in Ladysmith.
The shot of the day, however, belonged to American Daniel Berger, who chipped in for an eagle on the par 4 fifth hole.
For all your news updates, stay on Primetime News every Saturday and Sunday from 6 p.m.
Delayed diagnosis and treatment of hemophilia could have severe consequences. In some patients, this condition has resulted in disability. This was not the case with Alexander North of Gauteng resident Happy Sigwabetso. Although late, his diagnosis helped him to start a life-saving treatment.
I was diagnosed in 1992 by Dr. Ella Hartman in Para, where I was 10 years old.
Okay, and did you know about hemophilia then?
No, I didn't know until they told me and my mom.
Okay, how did it make you feel?
No, because as I was a child, I didn't understand anything because I used to play rough. But when I get the pain, like when I hurt myself, that's where I realize. When I get better again, I go back playing, doing some rough stuff.
Hemophilia patients are particularly prone to certain forms of bleeding. Bleeding into joints, redness and swelling of the larger joints, bleeding into muscle, and internal organs bleed. Hemophilia may be classified as severe, moderate, or mild. Sigwabetso says that his condition has worsened as he grew.
The severe one, hemophilia A with inhibitors, less than 1%.
And his treatment has changed over the years.
Before I was using factor 8, coagulate factor, that was the anti-clotting factor, where when I inject myself, it dissolves the swelling faster. It can take 3 days or to a week. So now I've changed the medication to another one, which is this one called Roach.
All his life, Sigwabetso is dependent on the government hospital for costly treatment.
No, it's very expensive, but I can't say in digits. It's very expensive. Like a vial, a bottle like this, it can say 15,000 per vial. So if there are 2, it's more expensive.
Sigwabetso says even though he has to face the fact that hemophilia will be part of his life forever, living with hemophilia is not a death sentence.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, we're talking hemophilia. We're now going to be talking about treatment for hemophilia. And I have with me Dr. Zipho Zonke Mafika in the middle, who's a hematologist based at Charlotte Maxeke Academic Hospital. And closest to me is Julia Malan, who's a genetic counselor, Administrator, South African Hemophilia Foundation and its central region. Of course, we still have with us Tebogo Mphahlele, a person with hemophilia and Vice Chairperson of the central region of the South African Hemophilia Foundation. Let's start with you, Dr. Mafika. We're talking principles of treatment, I suppose, for both children and adults. Yeah, we hear about this expensive treatment. Just take us through the principles. How is hemophilia treated?
Absolutely. So maybe just to give you a bit of background. So the treatment of hemophilia is a multidisciplinary effort.
Right.
In other words, it's not just going to be the hematologist that is going to be involved. It's the hematologist, it's the parents, it's the patient themselves, because they also need to understand why they get injected so many times in a week. It's the counselor, it's the social worker, it's the physiotherapist, it's the nurse, you name it. All of it becomes involved.
So do we need specialized treatment centers, as it were, or can any doctor treat hemophilia?
Absolutely. We want to zoom in specifically into the disease, and as a result, with the help of the South African Hemophilia Foundation and the World Federation of Hemophilia, we have got around 22 centers throughout the country, which are specialized hemophilia treatment centers, specifically that speaks for this condition, for the treatment of this condition. And particularly, I mean, the backbone, obviously, of the treating of these patients is giving them the deficient coagulation factor.
Right. The one that they inject themselves with.
The ones that they inject themselves with.
Why should it be so expensive? I know I'm asking you a difficult question. But
well, you know, previously it was very difficult, I mean, historically, to get coagulation factor which was safe and very effective in stopping the bleed. So the processes that go into manufacturing these products is quite intensive, and it requires obviously money. I mean, we've got in the majority of our patients plasma derived products. In other words, those are the ones that are made from blood, so fractionation of blood. So they take blood, they spin it down, and then they take plasma and they purify the plasma in order to get specific coagulation factors and purify it. In that process, they need to make sure that that plasma is not infected with HIV, with hepatitis, and any of the common ailments that may be unfortunately transfused to the patient if that has not been done. So it's a tedious manufacturing process, which I think then results in in the product being quite expensive. Yeah.
What about access? Everybody with hemophilia will have access to treatment, clearly.
Well, we want that. That's what we advocate for.
Okay.
I mean, particularly now in our central areas, we don't really have a problem. I think the biggest challenge is that some of the patients are not diagnosed, and it takes a while before they're diagnosed, and by the time they come to the attention of these treatment centers, they already have some existing complications. Yeah. But access really is what we really are striving for, which is why we're making this campaign, so that people may get to know about the disease and seek help quite early.
And treatment, just for the record, is lifelong?
It is lifelong at this stage, yeah.
Let's get back to you, Tebogo. How are you dealing with the fact that you have to now, as an adult, I imagine, take your treatment? How are you dealing with it, and how are you encouraging others, perhaps even younger ones, to you?
You're born with the condition, then it's yours. Live with it. You just need to learn to maneuver around it. Compliance with treatment, you get treatment, you get less bleeds, you get less interruptions. You can go to work, you can go to school whenever. Positive mind, just need to hang out with the same people of the like-minded, get motivation from them, but mainly treatment should always be available. If treatment is available, then there won't be any interruptions in your life. That is the only major issue.
Are there times when you feel, listen, I've had these injections every day, I don't want them anymore?
I've had that when I was young. I was like, nah. While other children are playing, I always make a joke that when other children were playing doctor nurse, I was actually being a doctor. But look, getting treatment, you can't get tired of living unless if you don't want to live anymore. Yeah.
Let's come back to support now. I mean, clearly, prevention, especially in children, prevention of injuries and that sort of thing is a major one. Your teachings in that aspect, what sort of messages do you send out?
I think the most important one is that they have to be children. So we won't be able to protect them from every bleed. And that's why we're campaigning for good treatment. We're now in a situation where we are raising a generation of people with hemophilia who won't be crippled by their disease, because we can put our children on prophylaxis. So that's what we're campaigning for. So a lot of our young children get their factor 3 times a week, which means they can really live a normal life. And that's what we want for them, and that's what we want their parents to realize. So yes, they're not going to be the rugby players, they're not going to do the contact sport, but they are going to be able to do sport, because sport is healthy for your joints, for your muscles. So we encourage our parents to let their children be active within limits, to let them live their lives, and therefore we need them to be compliant with their treatment plans.
Talk about compliance with treatment. Perhaps let me ask you, Dr. Mafika. There's often a problem with chronic lifelong treatment and adherence. What are the typical issues?
Well, typically, I mean, we tend to find in particular where there is transitioning periods when the person with hemophilia is transitioning from, for an example, primary school into high school, where now they're going to make new friends, and those friends may not necessarily understand the disease, and then they feel like they would obviously have to then tell their story again, and then another transition from matric, and then they go into university. Same thing, has to, happen, most often than not. And then there's no mom or dad that is watching over you and saying, did you give yourself factor? Show me your bleeding chart, kind of scenario. So we do tend to find some of those issues with the patients with hemophilia. But in your younger patients with hemophilia, for an example, as Julie has said, the overseeing by the parents, because it's a multidisciplinary thing that has to be advocated for, plays a big role in that regard.
Any complications to treatment? I mean, I see that obviously they have to inject themselves. I mean, do they have to move the injection site around?
So from a young age, I mean, the ones that are getting specifically the prophylactic factor, which means that's the preventative coagulation factor, they tend to have ports that are inserted, as you have seen with Ezra Roberts in one of the inserts. He's got a port in there that's inserted, and that port can last a few years before having to change, before having to change and get a new port. Right. And then you also get, some of the patients who are on demand, meaning they treat when they bleed. Those are the patients that we may have a problem with, the excess, venous excess and so on, and they may have to shift from one limb to another limb and so on in order to get.
Okay. Unfortunately, we don't even have time to go through that one tweet that came in. And yeah, this has been such a fascinating discussion on hemophilia. Our special guest, Dr. Zippo Zonke Mafika, a hematologist based at Charlotte Maxeke Hospital, and Julie Malan, genetic counselor at Hemophilia Foundation of South Africa, and of course, Tebo Kompashela, person living with hemophilia, vice chairperson, Central Region, South African Hemophilia Foundation. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for the input.
Thank you.
Folks, that's it. That's unfortunately all the time we had for. Health Talk will be broadcast on SABC 2 Wednesdays 11:30 to 12:30 live, then repeat at SABC News Channel on Thursday morning at 5 a.m. and again on Saturday morning between 9 and 10. Please keep those comments and questions and whatever else coming through on our Facebook page, SABC Health Talk, and perhaps Twitter at SABC Health Talk. I'm Dr. Salomon Daum. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for the questions.